She wasn't meant to be alive. Half-starved, one eye sealed shut, a frail German Shepherd puppy lay buried under the cold Oregon sand, and by chance, for Marines who should never have been there unearthed her. There was no barking, no fight, no cry for help, only silence, and a faint whisper of breath. That day, they didn't just rescue a dog. They uncovered something sacred, and what happened next would challenge everything you believe about mercy, loyalty, and the quiet miracles that still walk among us. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country below. And if you believe that even the smallest life deserves a second chance, make sure to subscribe, this story will stay with you. Port Orford, Oregon, a coastal town so still it felt like sound itself avoided it. Not the creepy kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, but the deep, breathing hush of pine trees and waves that seem to never stop moving. That morning, the Pacific was restless. It threw itself again and again against jagged cliffs, foaming over rocks that jutted up like broken teeth. A pale mist clung to the bluffs, and sea spray hung in the air like static electricity. The temperature was dropping fast, 52 degrees, maybe less, cold enough for breath to show, cold enough for bones to ache. For Marines were making their way down a narrow bluff trail that hugged the coastline. 3 moved in rhythm. 1 lagged behind. Staff Sergeant Cole Maddox, 34, led the way. He carried himself with that kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to shout. Tall, lean, all corded muscle and calm motion, he looked like a man who'd been carved from the things he'd survived. His face bore the weather of long deployments, cheeks marked by wind and grit, faint lines cutting deep around eyes that had seen too much too young. He moved like someone whose back had once been broken, because it had been. A roadside IED in Kandahar. He never spoke of it. Cole was the kind of man who measured twice, cut once, and only spoke when words actually mattered. The one thing soft about him was the worn leather cord tied around his wrist, threaded with the dog tag of a German Shepherd K9 he'd buried 4 years earlier. Behind him walked Ramirez, short, thick-built, with arms like telephone poles and skin the color of burnished copper beneath Oregon's gray sky. 29 years old, sharp-tongued, and loyal to the bone. Born and raised in East LA, he'd learned to fight early and survive harder. Beneath all the sarcasm, though, was a tenderness few ever saw, the kind that surfaced only when no one else was looking. He was grumbling this morning, loudly. "Man, I swear I've pulled morning duty 3 times this week," he muttered, kicking a wet stone down the trail. Next came Theo Lynn, the team's medic, a wiry 26-year-old with sharp features and sharper instincts. His parents owned a bakery in San Jose. He once planned to be a doctor. Then 9/11 happened, and everything changed. Now, he carried a small, battered field journal filled with symptoms, sketches, and notes, but spoke rarely, and only when necessary. Theo was silent that morning, his eyes scanning, cataloging, missing nothing. Bo Kenny brought up the rear, tall, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with messy blonde hair that never met regulation. At 24, he was the youngest of the group, still holding onto a surfer's grin, though today, that grin was missing. It had disappeared since the argument. They'd been at it since 0500, bickering about who should lead that day's navigation drill. The fight had gone far enough that Cole, usually quiet, finally snapped. "Everyone shut up and move. If we're gonna argue like teenagers, we'll do it while walking." That had been an hour ago. Since then, they hadn't said a word. And that's when it happened, a sound. It didn't belong to the wind or the sea. It was high, faint, and broken, more breath than voice. Cole froze mid-step. "You hear that?" Ramirez squinted. "You mean that creepy whispering?" Theo raised a hand. "Shoo. There it is again." The second time, it was clearer, a whimper, faint and ghost-like, carried on the wind but undeniably alive. They broke formation. Cole led them off the trail toward the slope above the rocks. A narrow shelf of sand lay below, littered with driftwood and shattered shells. The air stung with salt. The sound came again, closer. Ramirez was the first to see it. Oh my God. Cole, look. Just 10 feet ahead, at the edge of the dune, something moved beneath the sand. Barely, just a twitch. The top of a tiny head, no bigger than a grapefruit, poked through the packed earth. A puppy. One eye swollen shut, the other crusted with salt and grit. Her fur clung in gray, matted clumps, her muzzle caked in clay. She didn't bark. She couldn't. Just that broken, fragile sound again. Jesus, Theo breathed. She's buried. All four dropped to their knees. Cole reached first, brushing away the sand from her snout with a gentleness that surprised even him. Easy, girl. You're okay. We've got you. No collar. No tag. Just bones, breath, and a heartbeat faint enough to break your own. Ramirez swore under his breath and started clawing at the dirt with bare hands. Theo followed. So did Bo. Why would anyone do this? Bo muttered, voice shaking. She's just a baby. Theo's tone was clinical, but soft. She's still warm. That means she hasn't been here long, maybe a few hours. Cole's voice cut through the wind, firm and steady. No more talking. Dig. The sand was dense with clay and sea moisture. Each scoop drew blood from their knuckles. Theo used the flat edge of his knife. Ramirez tore his shirt off and used it like a shovel. Bo wrapped his sleeves around his palms to keep them from tearing open. The hole deepened slowly, painfully. She's stuck, Cole grunted. Feels like concrete, Bo said, panting. She's shutting down, Theo warned. If she stops moving, we'll lose her. Cole's jaw locked. Not on my watch. They dug harder. A rib cage appeared. Then one tiny paw, raw, twisted, scraped. Ramirez's voice cracked. Whoever did this. I swear. Later, Cole snapped. Focus. Minutes passed. The sun rose higher, but the mist refused to lift. Salt burned in their eyes. The only sounds were scraping hands and strained breathing. Then, with one final heave, Cole pulled her free. Her legs hung limp. Her head lolled to the side. Still breathing, barely. Theo checked. She's alive. But only just. Cole didn't hesitate. He wrapped her in Ramirez's torn shirt, pressed her against his chest, and stood. We're running. Get to the jeep. The wind howled off the coast as they sprinted, boots pounding the wet sand. The puppy's head rolled weakly in Cole's arms, her single open eye dull but blinking. Then Ramirez's shout cut through the roar. Wait. Cole, look. He pointed toward a low hollow in the dune where the sand bulged unnaturally, as if something below was pushing upward. Before anyone could react, Ramirez was on his knees again, digging. Seconds later, his voice broke. There's more. Two small heads surfaced, muzzles caked in grit, ears flattened. One motionless. The other, a black and tan pup, whined through a mouthful of sand. Theo dropped beside him. Same breed. Same litter. Ramirez, stay left. Bo, dig from the side, gently. Cole hesitated, torn. He still held the first pup against his chest, frail, almost weightless. Her single eye met his, cloudy, pleading, alive. He knelt again. Theo, he said quietly. How long can they last like this? Theo didn't look up. Depends. The cold helps, slows their bodies. But if their chests were compressed, they could suffocate in minutes. Ramirez's knuckles split open, blood mixing with the sand. Cole made his choice. Bo, take her. Get her to the truck. Leave the engine running. Bo's throat tightened, but he nodded, taking the fragile bundle from Cole's arms. Half-mile north, right? Right. Go. Bo sprinted off. Meanwhile, Ramirez and Theo were shoulder-deep in the earth. One pup twitched weakly. The other lay still. Come on, baby, Ramirez murmured. Breathe. Cole grabbed Theo's entrenching tool, a collapsible shovel, and began digging with controlled fury. Every scoop revealed more fur, more tiny limbs. Then Ramirez's hand hit something solid, plastic. There's a bag under here, he said. Tied shut. Cole froze mid-swing. What kind of bag? Heavy, Ramirez said. Feels like. Leave it. Dogs first, Cole barked. They pulled the first out, alive, barely. Theo wrapped it in his overshirt. The second one, the still one, took longer. When they finally freed her chest, Theo pressed 2 fingers to the ribs. No breath. Ramirez's voice broke. No, no, no. Come on, sweetheart. He rubbed the tiny chest with 2 fingers. Nothing, then a faint pulse. Theo worked quickly, drew water into a small plastic syringe from his canteen, dropped it onto the pup's tongue. A twitch, then another. She's still here, Theo whispered. We can do this. And then, a voice from behind. Hey! Marines! A woman's voice, firm, commanding. They turned to see Dr. Sarah Lane, moving quickly down the trail. Tall, wiry, late 40s, her dark hair streaked with gray and pulled into a braid beneath a knit cap. She wore jeans, a field jacket, and a medic's bag slung crossbody. A stethoscope swung against her chest as she knelt. Port Orford's only veterinarian, and a former Army field medic. You called in an emergency? She asked briskly. Cole nodded. 3 pups. Buried alive. One's already at the truck. Sarah's eyes flicked between them. Wrap them tight. Keep pressure off their ribs. The cold's helping for now, but they'll need heat soon. She touched the smallest one's side and didn't hesitate. She's critical. Fluids and oxygen, immediately. We've got transport, Cole said. Then move, she replied. I'll prep the clinic. 5 minutes if we hurry. Cole gathered the limp pup again. Ramirez carried the stronger one. Theo slung his med bag. Sarah led the way up the bluff. As they climbed, Ramirez glanced sideways. You were gonna leave, he said, not accusing, just curious. Cole's eyes stayed ahead. I thought about it. Then I saw her eye, and I couldn't. At the top, Bo's Jeep idled, engine rumbling, back seat piled with towels and jackets. Sarah threw open the door. Stack them in the back. I'll ride with them. Go. The Jeep roared forward, tearing through gravel and mud toward town. Sarah braced herself with one hand and held the weakest pup with the other, her voice calm, practiced. Ramirez and Theo flanked her, each cradling a bundle of life against their chests. Cole sat rigid in front, jaw locked, eyes on the fog-blurred road. Bo gripped the wheel tight enough for his knuckles to whiten, but it wasn't the driving that shook him. It was memory. He'd once held someone like this, his best friend, Lewis Carver, after a mortar strike outside San Jin. He remembered the weight, the stillness. But this time, he refused to lose another life. In the back seat, Sarah shifted, the smallest pup gave a raspy, shallow breath. Still with us, she said, steady. Theo leaned close. Gums are pale. She's crashing. Glucose gel, Sarah said, already reaching into her bag. She moved fast, efficient, every motion deliberate. A dab on her fingertip, smeared across the puppy's tongue. Come on, sweetheart. Sarah Lane had seen chaos before. 2 tours in Iraq as a field medic, enough blood, enough noise, enough loss. But this was life on a smaller, purer scale, and she refused to let it fade. Cole looked back. How bad? Sarah met his eyes. Minutes. Maybe less. Bo whispered, almost without realizing. Hang on, Nina. The name slipped out of him, Nenana, his grandmother's word for little girl. And somehow, it fit. Ahead, a sign emerged through the fog. Port Orford Animal Wellness Center. A small, weather-beaten building with red siding, tucked behind a gas station, its porch half swallowed by mist. We're here, Bo said, skidding to a stop. Sarah barked orders without missing a beat. Room 1, back left. Cole, start the generator. Theo, warm fluids. Ramirez, towels and heat pads, closet in the hall. They moved like a well-drilled unit. The air inside smelled faintly of antiseptic and cedar. Posters of smiling dogs lined the walls, ironic under the weight of what they carried. On the exam table, Sarah laid the smallest pup, Nina, under the harsh overhead light. Her limbs were stiff, her fur patchy, her skin bruised beneath the dirt. The glucose hadn't done much. Theo arrived with an 4 and saline. Sarah didn't wait. She shaved a tiny patch on Nina's leg and slipped the catheter in with the precision of habit. Hang the bag. Slow drip. Don't shock her system. Ramirez and Bo returned with towels and an ancient space heater. Sarah nodded. Plug it in. They worked without pause, 20 minutes that felt like hours. Scout, the biggest pup, began to stir. Echo, the middle one, whimpered softly. But Nina lay still. Bo stood frozen in the doorway, fists clenched. Sarah's voice softened. She held on long enough for you to find her. Don't count her out yet. Bo's throat tightened. He stepped closer, laid his palm on the table beside her. She deserves to live. Sarah nodded once. She's trying. Outside, Cole stood at the door, arms crossed, jaw set. He wasn't a man given to prayer, but his eyes didn't leave her. Then, suddenly, a cough. Soft, but real. Theo leaned forward. There it is. Sarah smiled faintly. Heartbeat stabilizing. It's weak, but it's real. Bo didn't breathe until Nina did again. Her eye fluttered open, barely a sliver, and locked onto his. A single tear traced down his cheek. You're not going anywhere, he whispered. Sarah looked up, voice steady. She's not out of danger yet. Bo nodded. Then we stay. By the time the sun began to fade behind the gray veil of Oregon's clouds, the wind had picked up again, carrying with it the damp chill of the Pacific. Outside, the flags at the old Coast Guard station trembled, and the porch door of the Port Orford Animal Wellness Center rattled softly in its frame. Inside, light spilled across the tiled floor, where the Marines sat scattered, waiting, watching. Theo Lynn sat on a hard wooden bench outside exam room 1. His elbows rested on his knees, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He hadn't spoken much since they'd arrived. He'd done everything he could, started IVs, adjusted heat pads, tracked breathing, and now, there was nothing left to do but wait. At 26, Theo still looked younger than he felt. There was something careful about the way he moved, like every motion was weighed before it happened. He had the smooth skin of a man who hadn't seen as much sun or sand as Cole or Ramirez, but his eyes told a different story, eyes that had watched life disappear more than once. From his breast pocket, he drew a worn photograph, creased, the edges soft from years of being folded and unfolded. It showed a small boy, 5 maybe, grinning beside a golden retriever with one floppy ear. Scout, that had been the dog's name. The same name, by coincidence, they had just given the biggest of the rescued pups. Theo ran his thumb over the old picture, then pressed it against his chest. He closed his eyes. Please, he whispered. Let them make it. Down the hall, the clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and cedar oil. Dr. Sarah Lane moved between the three pups, her braid pulled tight, her sleeves rolled up to the elbows. Her motions were clean, mechanical, like a pendulum swinging from one fragile life to the next. Scout, the largest, was doing well. He'd started to lap weakly at a dish of water, shifting his small weight uncomfortably but stubbornly staying upright. Echo, the middle pup, had her eyes open now, tracking movement across the room with a curious tilt of her head. But Nina, she was still curled tightly in on herself, her ribs fluttering like moth wings. Sarah had cleaned away the crusted clay and sea salt, revealing pale skin beneath. A heat lamp glowed above her, a slow drip of saline running into the catheter in her leg. Sarah adjusted it carefully, her lips pressed into a line that could have been concentration or prayer. Her temperature's rising, she murmured to no one in particular. But her blood pressure's still low. That eye. She paused, gently lifting the swollen lid. We might not save it. But we can save her. Cole stood silently in the corner, arms crossed. He hadn't left since they arrived. The fluorescent lights carved shadows across his face, deepening the lines at the corners of his eyes. He hadn't taken off his jacket. He hadn't sat down. Ramirez, perched on a stool beside Echo's table, looked up at him. What are you thinking, boss? Cole's voice was low. I'm thinking we almost took the high trail this morning. If we had. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Bo walked in then, balancing two steaming paper cups of gas station coffee. He handed one to Sarah. She accepted it without breaking stride, took a sip, grimaced slightly. That's awful. I know, Bo said. You're welcome. For the first time that day, Sarah smiled. Bo handed the other cup to Cole. They stood side by side in silence, the air filled with the soft hum of the heater and the steady beeps of the monitor beside Nina's table. Outside, the day was dying, but inside, the fight was far from over. The door creaked open behind them. Theo stepped in, eyes red, the photograph still in his hand. He didn't speak. He just moved toward Nina's table, uncoiling his stethoscope. Sarah stepped back without a word, giving him room. He pressed the metal disc gently against the pup's chest, listening. A long pause. Then he nodded. Stronger than before. Sarah's lips curved into a faint smile. Told you she's a fighter. Cole moved closer, glancing at the photograph Theo had set beside the towel. She yours? Theo nodded once. Long time ago. Lost her the week I shipped out. His voice cracked slightly. Didn't think I'd ever see another like her. Cole didn't respond, just placed a firm hand on Theo's shoulder. Ramirez turned away, pretending to busy himself with Echo's bandages. Bo shifted Scout's blanket for the 10th time, saying nothing. The air in the room changed, not lighter, exactly, but steadier. Outside, the last streaks of daylight faded behind the pines, and inside that small clinic, 3 tiny chests rose and fell in rhythm. None of the pups barked. None cried. But they were alive. And for now, that was enough. Night settled deep over Port Orford. Fog crept in from the coastline, softening every sound. From a distance, the lights of the clinic glowed faintly through the mist, a single pocket of warmth in an ocean of gray. Inside, time slowed to a crawl. None of the Marines had left. No one said it aloud, but every one of them knew they were staying through the night. Sarah offered blankets. They refused. She offered more coffee. They accepted. She understood. She'd done her own vigils once, different uniforms, different reasons, same ache. Back when she was a medic, she'd held pressure on wounds that wouldn't close. She'd watched breath slip away between her fingers and learned the heavy patience that comes with helplessness. So she left them be. Just past midnight, she stepped out, promising to return before sunrise. Her home was only a short walk away, a modest blue cottage behind a crooked fence, its porch light always left on in case anyone, human or animal, needed to find their way. In the front room, Cole sat cross-legged against the wall near the heater, eyes locked on Nina. She lay bundled in towels on a heating pad, a fleece blanket pulled over her tiny frame. Her breathing had steadied, though her body still trembled now and then. Across the room, Bo sat with his back to a cabinet, staring at her. "She's got a name now," he said softly. "Nah, that's what I called her earlier." "Think it stuck?" Cole didn't look away. "Nah," he repeated slowly, testing the sound. "Fits her. Small, but fierce." Bo nodded. "She made it this far. That counts for something." Ramirez lay flat on the floor, arm draped over his eyes. Hell of a name for a dog who fought her way out of a grave. Theo sat at the reception desk, pretending to read a veterinary manual he hadn't turned a page in for 20 minutes. He glanced up. "What about the others?" The second pup, Echo, was in a small crate, resting comfortably. Her ears were still too big for her head, twitching at every noise. When Theo had leaned over earlier, she tilted her head and let out a single, questioning yip. "Echo," Theo said. "She mirrors everything, sounds, movements, energy. She repeats the world back to you." Ramirez snorted. "So basically you with fur." Theo smirked. "Yeah, only cuter." Cole's gaze shifted to the largest pup, sprawled out beside the heater, snoring lightly. His fur had darkened as it dried, streaked with black and chestnut. Even asleep, he looked like he was standing guard. "Scout," Ramirez said immediately. "Why Scout?" Bo asked. "'Cause he's first in everything, first to move, first to eat, first to jump headfirst into danger. Like a forward recon." No one argued. The names settled naturally. Scout, the brave. Echo, the curious. Nah, the fragile fighter. Outside, the fog thickened, pressing against the windows like a living thing. Inside, warmth held fast. The silence wasn't heavy, it was reverent. A little before 3 a.m., Cole stood and stretched, his shoulders popping in protest. He stepped toward Nina's table again, crouching low. Her one open eye blinked lazily, then closed. He reached out, hesitated, then laid his palm flat beside her nose. For a long second, nothing. Then, a soft movement. Her tiny pink tongue flicked out, dry and trembling, and touched his hand. The world stopped. Ramirez sat upright. Bo leaned forward. Theo froze mid-turn. Cole's head bowed low, his forehead resting against the towel. His shoulders shook once, just once. When he lifted his face again, tears streaked freely down his cheeks. "She's still in there," he whispered. "She's still fighting." No one replied, but every one of them felt it, that small spark reigniting something they thought long dead. The night stretched on. They took turns sitting beside the pups. Bo hummed an old lullaby his grandmother used to sing. Theo recorded vitals and taped notes above each crate. Ramirez quietly cleaned the counters, muttering curses at the mess. And Cole never left Na's side. By the time the first pale wash of dawn brushed against the horizon, the names had taken root. 3 pups who shouldn't have survived. 4 Marines who had every reason to walk away. And yet, none of them had. For days had passed since the rescue. The clinic, once echoing only with the sterile hum of machines and hurried footsteps, had changed its rhythm. Now it was filled with soft sounds, the rustle of towels, the faint scratch of claws against metal trays, the occasional sigh from a Marine too tired to admit it. Every morning, the same ritual began. Coffee brewed too strong. The heater buzzed to life. And the men arrived, early, always early, as if time itself revolved around 3 fragile lives that refused to give up. Dr. Sarah Lane had stopped trying to send them home. She'd simply handed them a key to the side door and cleared out a storage room for them to nap in if they ever needed to. They rarely used it. Most nights, they slept on folding chairs or directly on the floor beside the pups' crates. Sarah watched them with something that felt almost foreign, admiration tempered by caution. She wasn't sentimental, not anymore. Not since the night her younger brother died while she was overseas, killed by a drunk driver while she was still stitching wounds in a desert hospital. Grief, she had learned, made the world smaller. Colder. But somehow, these men and these small, broken dogs were carving warmth back into that coldness. Scout, the largest of the 3, was thriving. That morning, he'd made it all the way from his crate to the front office by himself, pausing only to bark once at his own reflection in the shiny trash can. His fur had filled out, darker and thicker. His steps were confident now, his tail wagging like a small victory flag. He'd also discovered that Ramirez's bootlaces were chew toys sent by heaven. Echo, smaller but just as determined, was learning balance. Her back leg still wobbled when she tried to turn too quickly, but there was a strange sort of grace to her movements, almost like a dance. She followed voices instinctively, eyes bright with curiosity. Whenever Theo spoke, even in a whisper, she moved closer, ears perked like radar. And little Nina, was still fighting. Cole had built her a small wooden platform out of old crates and scrap aluminum from a broken kennel table. It was crude but steady, about 3 feet long, a foot high, with soft ramps on either end and a mat stretched across the top. Each morning, he lifted her gently onto it, kneeling beside her as she tried to stand. Her front legs had grown stronger. Her back legs still dragged like loose ropes, but her eyes, cloudy on one side, sharp on the other, were clear with determination. "Weight forward," Cole murmured, hands steadying her ribs. "Front paws flat. You've got this." Na strained, paws spreading wide, tiny claws pressing into the mat. Then she slumped, exhausted, letting out a soft, frustrated whine. "That's still progress," Bo said from across the room, sweeping sawdust and stray fur into a neat pile. "Yesterday she couldn't even lift her paws." Theo looked up from his logbook, pen in hand. "She's stubborn," he said with a small grin. "That's a good sign." Cole smiled faintly, brushing a thumb along her back. "She's a Marine," he said quietly. That morning, the clinic door creaked open. Ramirez stepped inside, his jacket damp from sea spray and a small brown paper bag tucked under his arm. "You know it's Sunday, right?" Bo asked. "Store barely open Sundays." "They open for me," Ramirez said flatly. He crouched beside Na, unrolling the top of the bag. Inside was something soft and blue, a tiny knitted sweater. Handmade, uneven, clearly done by someone who cared more about warmth than style. He slipped it carefully over Na's head, threading her paws through the sleeves. It hung loose around her chest but snug enough to hold in the heat. "There," he said, patting it into place. "Now she's got gear." Theo raised an eyebrow. "You bought her a sweater?" "She's a soldier," Ramirez muttered. "And a cold soldier's a useless one." Bo laughed, loud and genuine. "That might be the softest thing I've ever seen you do." "Shut it," Ramirez growled, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Even Cole chuckled quietly, adjusting the hem of the sweater around Na's small frame. "Thanks," he said. Ramirez only shrugged and headed toward the door. "Coffee's still terrible. I'm getting a refill." The door closed behind him, and the room went still again. Na blinked up at Cole, the blue wool framing her tiny body like armor. Then, with a sudden grunt of effort, she pressed her front legs down and lifted her chest. Only for a second, maybe 2, but it was higher than before. Cole froze. "That's it," he whispered. "That's how we win." Theo scribbled in his notebook. Bo leaned over. What's that? Theo flipped it around with a grin. Day 4, now lifted front chest on platform while wearing blue sweater. Possible correlation, blue equals power. Bo chuckled. Might be superstition. Might be faith, Theo said. By late afternoon, the quiet hum of the clinic was interrupted by the sound of the front bell jingling. A tall woman in her early 60s stepped in, silver blonde hair braided down her back, eyes sharp as sea glass. She wore a heavy knit cardigan and carried a large canvas bag overflowing with yarn. Marta Haywood, president of the Port Orford Knitting Circle. 6 retirees, 1 mission, keep the town's shelter animals and newborns warm. Sarah met her at the counter. Morning, Marta. What brings you in? Heard about your Marines, Marta said briskly. And their buried puppies. Word travels faster than the tide around here. She reached into her bag and pulled out 3 more tiny sweaters, 1 deep red, 1 mustard yellow, 1 forest green. Made these for the others. They'll outgrow them by next week, but everyone deserves a bit of comfort. Sarah smiled softly. You didn't have to. I know, Marta replied, already turning to leave. But I wanted to. Bo watched her go. That woman's terrifying. She's also my landlord, Sarah said dryly. And once chased a city councilman with a broom over a parking space. Don't cross her. Within minutes, all 3 pups were outfitted. Scout's red sweater fit perfectly, bold against his dark fur. Echo's green one slid halfway off as she tried, gleefully, to chew it. And Na just blinked at them all, blue wool wrapped snug around her tiny ribs. She stood again, this time longer, lifted her chest fully, legs trembling, and before she lost her balance, she stumbled forward into Cole's lap. He caught her gently, a hand on her back, a smile softening his usually hard eyes. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The 10th morning dawned clear and golden. After days of fog, the sky finally looked scrubbed clean, the air crisp, smelling of pine and brine. The sea wasn't angry today, it breathed in slow, even waves, curling gently against the sand. The Marines stood at the edge of a small turnout just north of town, the same stretch of coast where it had all begun. 10 days ago, they'd found life buried here. Today, they came to return to the place that had broken and remade them. Cole stood at the front, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the dunes as if expecting the sand to move again. Beside him, Scout tugged at his leash, sniffing the wind. He'd grown fast, fur darker now, his chest broader. Bo had made him a new collar from braided paracord with a small metal tag that read Scout. Behind them, Echo danced in uneven circles, her green sweater fraying at the edges from her constant chewing. Ramirez held her leash loosely, letting her dart and bounce, curiosity sparking at every movement, birds, shells, the glint of water. And then there was Na. Her blue sweater fit tighter now around her belly. Her gait was unsteady, but she walked, 4 paws pressing into the sand for the first time since the burial. Each step was slow, deliberate, sacred. Cole had looped her leash loosely around his wrist, but he didn't guide her. She led. Theo walked behind, carrying a small canvas bag. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a wooden marker Bo had carved from an old crate. Sarah Lane had joined them, too. She stood back near the trail, hands tucked in her jacket pockets, her breath visible in the cold. Her eyes never left the dogs. No one spoke as they descended toward the shore. The only sounds were the crash of distant waves and the whine of the wind through the cliffs. Echo yipped once at a crab skittering across a tide pool. They stopped at the flat stretch of beach, the exact spot where Cole had first dropped to his knees in the sand. He exhaled slowly. "This is it," he said. Bo looked around. "Doesn't even look the same." "That's 'cause it isn't death anymore," Theo murmured. They stood silently, the wind tugging at their sleeves. Na's breathing quickened, but she stepped forward. Her hind legs shook, but she didn't fall. 3 steps. Then she stopped, lifted her head, and looked up at Cole. He knelt down, pressed his forehead gently against hers. "You did it," he whispered. "You came back." Bo unwrapped the cloth bundle and held up the small wooden post, sanded smooth, its top carved with rough letters. This was where death began. Now it's where life restarted. Ramirez handed him a hammer, and together, they drove the post into the sand just above the tide line. It stood crooked, weathered, and perfect. Scout barked once. Echo chased after a gull. Na sat beside the post, her front legs folded neatly beneath her, her one good eye fixed on the sea. Sarah stepped forward, standing beside Cole. "I've buried animals here before," she said softly. "Ones I couldn't save. But I've never come back to their graves. Maybe I should have." Cole glanced at her. "Places don't have to stay what they were," he said quietly. Sarah nodded once. "Neither do people." Bo and Ramirez unpacked a small lunch, jerky, peanut butter packets, and lukewarm coffee. The dogs circled, curious. Cole sat in the sand beside Na, who pressed against his side, eyes on the water. Theo squatted nearby as Echo pawed at his boot. "You think they remember?" Theo asked. Cole looked at him. "Not the way we do. But they know." Sarah smiled faintly. "Animals don't need to remember to heal. They just need a place to begin again." They stayed there until the sun slipped behind a curtain of clouds and the cliffs cast long shadows across the beach. When it was finally time to leave, Cole lingered. He turned once more to look at the marker. Scout bumped his leg. Echo yipped at the wind. Na took one last step forward, steady, sure, and didn't fall. For the first time in 10 days, Cole allowed himself to believe that in saving these small lives, something in him had been saved, too. By the 3rd week, everyone in Port Orford knew the story. At the post office, people whispered about the buried pups the Marines had found. At the bait shop, old fishermen spoke of it like a local legend, part miracle, part ghost story. And on the bulletin board at the community center, a laminated flyer appeared one morning. It showed 3 tiny German shepherds, Scout, Echo, and Na, curled together under mismatched knitted sweaters. Above them were printed the words, "From buried to brave, service dog training accepting candidates now." It had been pinned there by Mara Green, the regional coordinator of the Veteran Companion Initiative, a nonprofit that paired trained rescue dogs with veterans battling PTSD, depression, or physical wounds that never quite healed. Mara was in her early 50s, her salt and pepper dreadlocks tied back with a red scarf. Her presence filled the room before she even spoke, calm, confident, and warm in the way only those who have walked through pain can be. She was a former Army medic and counselor, and for the past 6 years, she'd led the Oregon outreach branch of the program. Over 200 veterans had found new purpose through her dogs. When she heard Sarah's voicemail, 3 rescued shepherd pups, found buried alive by Marines, she drove 4 hours from Eugene without stopping once. She arrived with a clipboard, a notebook, and eyes that saw right through the surface of things. The moment she stepped into the clinic and saw Na hobbling down the hallway, one eye squinting, one bright with defiance, she smiled. "She's got it," Mara said softly. "They all do." The next week, the training began. The place was called Windrest Ranch, a wide, windswept property about 15 minutes inland. Pastures rolled beneath the open sky, stretching behind cedar barns and a line of weathered flags that snapped gently in the wind. The program usually lasted 8 weeks, but Sarah vouched for both the Marines' commitment and the pups' resilience. So, Mara made an exception, they'd join an accelerated program. Each man was paired with the dog he'd already bonded with. Bo with Scout, Theo with Echo, and Cole, of course, with Na. The first day was chaos. Scout tried to climb onto every bench and table he could find, tail wagging like a flag of mischief. Echo barked at her own shadow, then promptly tried to chase it. And Na froze halfway through the front gate, trembling at the vast openness before her. Cole didn't coax or pull. He simply knelt down beside her, resting his hand palm up on the grass. "Take your time," he murmured. "We move when you're ready." For a long while, Na didn't budge. Then, inch by inch, she moved, one paw forward, then another. Her blue sweater brushed against the grass. Her ears twitched. And then, quietly, she crossed the threshold. Veterans of all ages came to the ranch daily. Some walked with canes. Others rolled in wheelchairs. A few barely spoke at all. One of them was James "Jimmy" Harlow, a tall man in his late 40s, shoulders once broad and strong but now slouched under invisible weight. His beard was thick and gray, his eyes quiet and hollow. According to Mara, Jimmy hadn't spoken more than a handful of words in nearly 5 years, not since his 3rd tour in Afghanistan. On the 4th day, Na wandered toward him. She didn't bark. Didn't wag her tail. She simply approached, sat beside his wheelchair, leaned her small body against his leg, and stayed there. For a moment, Jimmy didn't move. Then his hand, large, trembling, lowered to her head. He pressed his palm gently between her ears. "Just contact. Just wait." And then, he began to cry. Not loud, not messy, just quiet, broken sobs that sounded like they'd been waiting years to escape. Mara saw it from across the yard. She placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. "You know what that means?" she asked. Cole nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "It means she's already doing the job." By the end of the week, Na had become the smallest celebrity of Windrest Ranch. Her one good eye met everyone's gaze without fear. She never jumped, never demanded attention, she simply arrived, silent and steady, grounding whoever she touched. She had the kind of presence that calmed a room just by being there. Sarah visited on the 6th day, standing at the fence line as the afternoon sun spilled gold over the fields. Scout was leading Bo through a small obstacle course, his tail a blur. Echo was practicing "stay" commands beside Theo, her body vibrating with energy she could barely contain. And Na was curled beside a young woman with burn scars tracing her neck and hands, letting her brush her fur gently. Sarah didn't interrupt. She just watched. At week's end, they held a closing ceremony in the old barn. There were no speeches, no applause, just quiet smiles and nods of understanding under the slanted beams of evening light. Each Marine stood beside his dog as Mara read their names aloud, certifying the completion of the first phase of training. A paper certificate meant little compared to what they'd actually gained: peace, purpose, and connection. Afterward, Sarah found Cole outside near the pasture fence, the sky painted with that strange blue that only came before dusk. Na sat pressed against his leg, her small body warm against the cool wood. Sarah joined him, resting one arm on the rail. "You did good with her," she said softly. Cole didn't answer at first. He just kept his eyes on the horizon. After a long pause, Sarah spoke again. "Mara mentioned there's a vet in Montana, lives alone, dealing with PTSD. She thinks Na might be a perfect fit." Cole's hand stilled on Na's head. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I'd ask you." Cole looked down at Na. Her ear twitched, her one bright eye blinked up at him, trusting. He exhaled through his nose, slow and steady. "Tell her no," he said finally. Sarah turned to him. "You sure?" "She needs someone steady," he said quietly. "Someone who sees her for who she is, not for what she's been through. And maybe I need that too." Sarah smiled, a small, knowing curve of her mouth. "Sounds like someone just found his new orders." Cole chuckled once, the sound rough with emotion. "Maybe I have." That night, back in town, the group gathered one last time inside the clinic. The crates were folded, the medications sealed and logged. Scout lay sprawled across Bo's boots, snoring softly. Echo had climbed into Theo's lap and refused to leave. And Na was curled on her familiar fleece blanket in the center of the room, her blue sweater stretched and worn but still bright. Mara stopped by briefly to deliver final documents, ownership papers, vet records, service dog certifications. Ramirez signed Scout's forms without hesitation. Theo lingered a moment over Echo's name before adding his signature. Cole stared at Na's file longer than either of them. Then, finally, he signed. Sarah watched from the doorway. "You keeping her?" she asked quietly. Cole smiled faintly. "No," he said, glancing down at the small dog asleep beside his boot. "She's keeping me." They stepped outside together, men, dogs, and something that looked very much like family. The night air smelled of salt and pine. Above them, the stars glimmered faintly through the thinning fog. The world hadn't changed. But they had. Because sometimes, the greatest miracles begin in the quietest places. A forgotten beach, a trembling breath, a single step forward. Na was never supposed to survive. Scout and Echo were never meant to be found. And yet, through the hands of those who refused to look away, they did more than survive, they rose. This story isn't just about rescue. It's about redemption. About how brokenness doesn't mark the end, but the beginning of something sacred. Because in the hands of grace, even what's buried can come back to life. Maybe you felt like Na, overlooked, tired, struggling to stand. Or maybe you've been like Cole, trying to be strong while carrying a weight no one else can see. Wherever you are, remember this. God hasn't forgotten you. He still sends quiet miracles, sometimes on 4 legs, sometimes wearing a tattered blue sweater. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs hope. Comment Amen if you believe in second chances. And subscribe, because together, we can keep telling stories of healing, courage, and quiet grace. May God bless every heart that stayed to the end. And may we all keep spreading light. The ocean was calm again that morning, as if it had been holding its breath for weeks and finally let it go. Soft waves rolled against the shore near Port Orford, washing over the footprints that led to the small wooden post the Marines had planted days earlier. The tide had reached it now, brushing at its base, but the words carved there still stood clear beneath the spray. This was where death began. Now it's where life restarted. A gull called overhead, circling once before disappearing into the mist. And somewhere beyond that gray horizon, the world kept moving, but something here had changed for good. Inside the Port Orford Animal Wellness Center, sunlight slanted through the windows for the first time in days, painting the floor in gold and dust. Sarah Lane stood at the counter, flipping through medical files. She wasn't reading them so much as touching them, reminders of a week that had rewritten the quiet rhythm of her life. She looked up as the door opened. Cole stepped in, his usual calm shadowed by something softer. Na trotted beside him, smaller than Scout, slower than Echo, but steady now. Her limp was lighter. Her fur, glossy. Her blue sweater freshly washed. "Morning, Doc," Cole greeted, voice low but lighter than before. "Morning, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "How's our miracle today?" Na wagged her tail once, a single thump against the tile. "Still fighting," Cole said, crouching to adjust the sweater's sleeve. "Still winning." Sarah smiled. "That's what Marines do." "And dogs," he added quietly. Later that afternoon, the others arrived. Bo came first, Scout bounding beside him with energy that filled the clinic like laughter. Theo followed, Echo prancing on a green leash, ears flicking at every sound. Ramirez arrived last, a paper cup of bad coffee in one hand and a box of treats in the other. The room was noisy again, full of movement, warmth, and the kind of chaos only healing brings. Sarah leaned against the doorway and watched them, smiling. These were soldiers and strays, all of them, stitched together by chance and mercy. You know, she said softly, half to herself, maybe this town needed you as much as those dogs did. Cole looked up, brow furrowing slightly. How do you mean? Port Orford's quiet, she said. Too quiet sometimes. You boys brought life back into it. Ramirez smirked. We also brought noise, document. A lot of it. Sarah chuckled. That's the best kind. By sunset, the group walked together to the bluff overlooking the sea. The air was cold and clean. The horizon burned orange where the sun sank behind the clouds. 3 dogs sat side by side, Scout, Echo, and Na, their sweaters glowing faintly in the fading light. Bo tossed a stick, and Scout sprinted after it like a streak of joy. Echo barked, chasing shadows. Na stayed beside Cole, watching the waves. He crouched down, resting his hand gently on her back. You feel that, girl? That's home. She looked up, one bright eye meeting his, and leaned into his leg. No sound, no movement, just the steady rhythm of 2 survivors breathing in sync. Theo stood nearby, watching. She's different now, he said. So are you, Bo replied. Theo smiled faintly. Guess we all are. A week later, a letter arrived at the clinic. The return address, Windrest Ranch. Inside, a photograph. It showed Jimmy Harlow, the quiet veteran, standing at the ranch fence. Na sat at his feet, now wearing a small silver tag engraved with her name. The note beneath it, written in shaky penmanship, said simply. She's doing her duty. And so am I. Sarah placed the photo on the clinic's bulletin board, next to a picture of the Marines with the 3 pups. For a long moment, she just stared, then whispered. Good girl. Weeks passed. Winter crept along the coast, but the porch light of the clinic still burned each night. Sometimes travelers stopped just to look at the photos inside. Some brought strays of their own. And sometimes, though they never announced it, the Marines stopped by, 1 or 2 at a time, to sit with Sarah, sip terrible coffee, and remember. They talked about little things, the wind, the training, Ramirez's failed attempt at knitting a replacement sweater. But they always ended the same way. Someone would say, quietly. We should go see the post again soon. And they would. On the first warm day of spring, they returned. The dunes were covered in wild grass now, soft and green. The tide had pulled back, leaving behind a stretch of smooth sand and the faint imprint of the wooden marker still standing firm. Scout led the way, bounding across the shore with Bo right behind him. Echo ran circles around Theo, chasing seagulls that didn't care. And Na, no longer fragile, no longer trembling, walked at Cole's side, leash slack, blue sweater faded but proud. She stopped by the post, sniffed the sand, and then, as if remembering, sat down. Cole crouched beside her. The sea breeze lifted his hair, and for the first time in a long while, his smile reached his eyes. You made it, he said. We all did. Ramirez came up behind him, a camera in hand. One more for the board. Cole nodded. They stood together, 4 Marines, 3 dogs, 7 survivors, as the shutter clicked. That photo would hang beside the others in Sarah's clinic. And years later, long after the sweaters had frayed and the Marines had gone their separate ways, locals would still point to it when telling the story. The story of the buried shepherds. Of the Marines who found them. Of the doctor who refused to give up. And of the miracles that began on a gray morning when 4 men heard a single whimper beneath the sand. Some stories are written in books. Others are written in scars and second chances. This one was written in paw prints. And faith. And grace. Because sometimes, the quietest miracles don't shout. They whisper. They breathe. They rise from the sand, and they walk again. If this story reached you, share it. Someone out there needs to know that hope is still real. Comment Amen if you believe that even what's buried can live again. And remember, miracles don't always roar, sometimes, they just wag their tails. Thank you for watching. God bless you. And as always, keep spreading light.